Good afternoon, everybody. It's a fresh new day, fresh new week, and a fresh new chapter. I'm going to go over with you chapter 8 of my new book, A Spiritual Soul book. The best book on the market for anybody who wants to experience spirituality. And when we go through these chapters, I don't read exactly word for word as is printed in the book. I add a little, I maybe subtract a little, I embellish it so that you should get an expanded, a deeper experience and appreciation of the words that are in this book. If you haven't yet picked up a book, I strongly suggest that you go to Amazon or you go to a spiritualsoulbook.com and you can pick up a book, a hard copy with a soft cover, or you can pick up a Kindle edition so you can carry it wherever you go. The book is a big book. There's almost 800 pages. So for some people that may be too big and too heavy. But there's no excuse because there's a Kindle edition you can get for your phone. And that's going to help you become a spiritual soul. Everybody got it inside themselves, but that's what this book is going to address, the fight that goes on between the physical, the corporeal, and the spiritual. This book is going to help you. The wisdom in this book is going to help direct you to uncover and to draw from the spiritual source that is within you. So let's start with chapter 8. But before we start with chapter 8, I want to share with you a story from the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, before the most recent. The most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe, our current Rebbe, is Rabbi Menachem Mendel, and his father-in-law was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and that was the Rebbe that was the before the present Rebbe. And he says a story with a Chossid, a very well-known Chossid, of the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe was Rebbe number 2 after Rebbe number 1. Rebbe number 1 for the Chabad movement was the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shner Zalman. He was the author, he is the author of the Holy Tanya. And the Holy Tanya is the wisdom, for the most part, that is in this book, A Spiritual Soul book, and specifically the first 30 or so chapters. The first 30 or so chapters that are talking about the power of thought, the impact of thought, is all in the Tanya. And with other Hasidic discourses, it turns into a spiritual soul book. And that was Rebbe number 1. Rebbe number 2 is the Mittler Rebbe. And the Mittler Rebbe, who was a son of the Alter Rebbe, he had a great Chossid, strong, ardent follower. His name was Reb Chaim Ber Musayov. And he was from the city, the very famous city of Krementchug. And he was a wine merchant. And one day he had to take a trip for the purpose of his business to Kishenev, which was in Serbia. And he makes the trip. He goes over there to his buddy, his business associate, comes to his address, but he's not there. So, as a chassid, he takes the moment to think and to develop further the last Hasidic discourse that he's working on, together with everything of the past, and he's trying to apply to his own life, and he's trying to have it influence him even more deeply. And meantime, the business associate comes in, and he sees him there sitting down, deep in thought, not even noticing what's going on around. Knowing this chassid, that he was this intellectual, he says, I'll leave him. When he's finished, we'll do the business that he came for. And meantime, he eats his dinner or his lunch, whatever it was. When he's finished his dinner, Reb Chaim Ber finally gets up from his thinking and from his contemplation, from his meditation, and he sees the sun is going down, it's getting dark outside, and he says, I gotta do the mincha, I gotta do the afternoon service. But in the meantime, he sees his business associate, who is from Kishenev in Serbia. And he says to him, Shalom Aleichem, greetings to you. How are things in Kishenev? And he starts to get up to look for the water basin to wash his hands before he says the afternoon services. not realizing all along that he happens to be no more in Krementchug, but he went already to, he's now in Serbia, and he's at the address of his business associate, and he doesn't even realize all that. And the previous Rebbe said there's a very, very big lesson from this story. And the big lesson in this story is that it's all about where you put yourself into. It is possible that a person could be on a business trip in Kishenev, but yet his soul, who he is entirely still in Krementchug, learning a Hasidic discourse, hearing it from the holy mouth of his Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe. That's the power of thought. It transports, it elevates, it literally takes a person to a different place. And that's what we're going to talk about in chapter 8. Your thoughts place you. A person, who are we talking about when we talk about a person? Are we talking about his glasses? Are we talking about his clothes? What are we talking about when we say a person? We're talking about the real person, his soul, and who he really is. A person is where his thoughts are. We have already established that from the Zohar, that Adam ihu machshava, that a person is where his thoughts are. He is his thoughts. We're going to develop that idea in just a moment. A mystic once told his student, the mystic happens to be over here, Rabbi Shmuel Betzalel, the Rashbatz, the tutor of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was younger, he had this practice, this habit, that he would go up to the window and he would like look out the window, like people walk up to a window and just glare outside, they stare outside, with no particular purpose in mind. And the previous Rebbe would do that. But his teacher, his tutor, the Rashbatz, would tell him, there are times when it is better to be on the outside looking in than to be on the inside looking out. He tried to change that habit in the previous Rebbe with the thought and the explanation, when you're looking outside, then you are like outside. But if you were on the outside looking in, that would be better, because then your mind and your identity will be where it's supposed to be, and that is not on the outside, but where it's supposed to be, and that is on the inside. And this is a very profound idea. If you had a choice, would you rather live in $1 million house while in your mind you are living in darkness and ugliness? And I know a lot of people like that. A lot of $1 million houses around here, multi-million-dollar houses. And the experience I've had with many of those people have not been very good. Divorced, on the third marriage, children that are fighting, waiting for their parents to die. The parents know about it, and they can't live with themselves with that thought in their mind. An ugly existence. Or would you rather live very modestly while in your mind and in your life and between your children and in your personal existence, the sun is always shining? I know, and I believe most people, if they were presented with this choice, they would take the latter. Because it's not about where you live physically, it's about where you live mentally that matters the most. The fact that thoughts have the power to place the entire person in a state of existence in the present moment, and ultimately the thoughts that a person has puts the person in actuality, in a changed physical reality. This substantiates the closeness between the garment of thought and one's soul. You can see very clearly and obviously how powerful the garment of thought is in these few thoughts that I just shared with you. Even though the desire for something, derives from an even deeper place in one's soul than thought, here's another idea. In the hierarchy of the soul, there is desire, pleasure. That's very high up experience in the soul. Then there's will, what you want. And they, in order for them to express themselves, they must always express themselves in your consciousness through your thought. So although they themselves are on a higher, deeper level and experience of the soul, but they can't express themselves unless they pass through the garment of thought. That desire must always flow through the conduit of thought in order to express itself. That is why we find the twofold expression in the Torah. You can say that maybe it's a contradiction. It's no contradiction at all. There is one expression that says that wherever a person's desire and will is, that's where he is. So you're talking about the person's desire and will. And then there's another expression that says, that where a person's thoughts are, that's where the person finds himself. So is it about the thought, or is it about the will and the desire? What gets a person to a certain reality about themselves? Is it more about what they desire and what they will, or is it more about where they think? It's all true, because the only way desire can express itself is through thought, which is the garment that is attached constantly with the person's soul. What a person wills and what he wants is always going to express itself in the consciousness of a person's garment of thought. And it is thought that is attached that deeply and that strongly with the person's own soul. So it's all true. Where a person's will and where a person's desire and what a person really thinks about, that's the crux of the matter. Where they think and what they think about is always going to determine where the person truly is. If they're living a happy, unhappy, it's all determined. Your life is all about where your thoughts are. What you truly desire will express itself in your thoughts. Because thoughts is always the vehicle for the soul. So anything that happens with the soul, the first garment, we use that expression in the past already, right? A person has to put on garments in order to communicate with the world. The same is also with your faculties of the soul. They operate through garments. And the garment that is closest and constant for the soul is thought. And that is the vehicle through which the soul expresses itself. So what you truly desire will express itself in your thoughts. And whatever you are thinking about, we've already established that, is who you are and where you will find yourself in life. This influence and an impact of thought on the soul is not superficial, but an actual transference of the soul itself to where the thoughts are. This isn't just a superficial experience on the outside of the soul that the thoughts will take you to, but you, whoever you are, right, the soul, remains separate or detached or not totally and completely into what your thoughts are about. That's not what's happening. What you think about, since that is the garment of the soul, that is the vehicle and the tool that the entire soul operates through it, that means the actual soul itself is transported to the kind of thoughts you have in your mind. Desire in the mind and what you allow yourself to think of represents the yearning and the course plotting of the soul itself. You are taking your soul places when you think one way or the other. By contrast, when one says something or acts in a certain way, it may very well be one of the heart and one of the mouth. The talk or the act can be totally outward and not at all authentic to oneself. When it comes to the other ways that the soul expresses itself, which is speech and action, because they are at a distance and separate, and they are only put on whenever you decide to put them on, that distance creates a possibility that what's expressed through those garments is not always totally 100% what the soul really is. And therefore, backwards too, it doesn't take the entire soul in it and through it. Not so in the case with thought. Thought, this is what we're trying to say in these few chapters, and how I introduced the entire book, and why it's so powerful and important to be conscientious of the kind of thoughts you feed your mind. When it comes to the garment and the vehicle of thought, because it is so permanently and constantly attached to the soul, it actually is going to mold, and it's going to take the entire soul through it on this trip that the thoughts are about. When angels above are passionate for godliness, they are described as being one with God and even higher than God. Because that's what thoughts can accomplish. When the angels are only a creation of God, but when they are passionate about something, and we said that desire and will must always express itself through thought, and thought actually transports the soul to where the thoughts are working. The Torah describes the place of the angel to be on par with God, or even higher than God, if that would be possible, because of the passion that the angels have at that moment. When a person yearns for something and is thinking strongly of this wish and aspiration, he is guiding his soul in that direction. And as far as the soul is concerned, he is right there at this moment. Let me go on with that idea, and you'll see how true and real that is. So, for example, if a person desires and thinks holy thoughts, he thinks that he's together with the tzaddik, and he's together with the Rebbe, and he thinks that he's in shul, and he's praying, and he's thinking of the words of King David. That is where his actual life is now embedded in. He's taking a bath in that energy. He's becoming surrounded, and he's becoming impacted by those thoughts. When a person desires and thinks unholy thoughts, that is also where his life is now. I don't have to explain much about that. When you are thinking about holiness, when you are thinking about uplifted, positive, happy, then that's actually where you are, and that's who you are. It's not just something that's happening superficial. It's something that's happening very real. It's making a mark. It's putting its imprint. It's pretty serious. And when you think about things that are not so holy, then that's where you are. Don't want to be in that kind of a bath. It stinks. And sometimes the smell stays even after you left there, because there's the memory of the smell, or there's the actual residue of the smell. Okay, let's not get too much into that. Physically, Chassidus tells us, a person may appear to be in a holy place, yet where he really is and what his character reflects is one that is rolling around in the mud no better than a cow. I think I said the story here, or when was I? Yeah, it was last week. And I said the story of what appeared to be the pious guy sitting on the Shabbat table, but the Baal Shem Tov showed all his students it was an ox with a strimal, with a big hat. As far as who he really is, and the way God regards his identity, and what is really his influence on the aura around him, was no better than an ox. By the way he was eating, maybe he didn't say a blessing. He was so involved in the enjoyment. So some people can look like holy rollers with a beard and a yarmulke and big tzitzis, but the truth is, they're no better than a cow rolling in the mud. And the truth of the matter is, some people don't have a beard, even though you should have a beard. And they don't look so holy roller, but they may be almost, or maybe even, an angel of God. Because where a person really is where his sincere and sincerest yearning and desires are. I had a very famous teacher who was once in the Gulag in Siberia for 15 years, Reb Mendel Futterfass. On his birthday, he imagined himself asking for a blessing from his spiritual mentor, the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. And you want to know something? He actually received a response. But this is really way ahead of what we're talking about right now. This is transporting the person actually to where his thoughts are. To the point that the Rebbe received those thoughts and physically responded with a letter to his wife, who was in Paris at that time. But that's the power of thought. You know, many of you who know me know of my interest in science and specifically in quantum physics, which, God willing, He should give me health. That's going to be my next book. And it's all about the wave. It's all about figuring out the wave. And it's all about transportation faster than the speed of light. And it's all about entanglement, quantum entanglement, and a connection between things that are a distance from each other. In the realm and in the world of thought, all of that is possible. A person can be in one place physically, but can actually be spiritually, and who the person really is, in a totally better place. Yes, it is very true and very real. How we think is so powerful that it can take us to great places. And that's why the Rebbe said many different times why it's so important to think Mashiach, to think redemption, to imagine redemption, to learn about it, and to know what you should imagine about. And then you and us will already start the process on a real level of bringing and making Mashiach a reality in this world. That's chapter 8. Don't forget to buy the book. Then you can follow it with me in the book, chapter 8. God willing, we should have health. Next week, we're going to do chapter 9. Have a great day, everybody, and a spiritual life.